Think back to your very first sales call. The first time you went out and engaged another individual for the sole purpose of parting them from some of their money in exchange for your goods and services. I want you to remember the preparation that you did and how you felt when you first walked in. I know some of you are remembering because you're starting to twitch just a little bit. You're looking at the floor. You're tearing up. I want to suggest to you that we may need to go back there. There may be a need for us to go back and revisit as if we were doing our very first sales call again. Because in fact, sales is changing. There's been more change in the world of sales in the last 14 months than there has been in the last 20 years. Tectonic change is happening in sales. Many things are happening. But what is not happening is we don't change our priorities. We don't necessarily change our principles, but we do need to look at technologies and processes. Are there things we could be doing differently in order to sell more effectively in this new world? And that's what we're going to spend our time this afternoon talking about. This is one of my favorite audiences. I love looking out and seeing a lot of gray hair. How many of you who have gray hair earned every single one of them? Could I see your hands? Yep. And how many of you earned them in front of customers? Could I see your hands? Absolutely. So what's going on now in sales that makes us have to rethink and reorient ourselves going forward? As you heard in the introduction, I've spoken about 3,500 times, spoken all over the world. I've spoken in Canada, in Vancouver, in Calgary, in Banff, and Toronto, and Montreal, and Yarmouth. And every time I come home from Canada, I am impressed by the inherent superiority of the Canadian culture. There are things going on in your world and your culture that set you above everyone else. 60% of my clients are CEOs. They're CEOs of mid-market companies and larger. And last week when I was preparing to come and speak to you, I started going through the numbers, and what I found was nearly 5% of them have either targeted Canada as their target market. This is where they want to go sell now because your economy is performing better than ours. Or they're looking at opening branches in Canada, and a couple are looking at moving their entire operations to Canada. Now, what does that tell you? That should say to you there's some opportunity here. There are some chances here for you to reach this incredible number. You're going to drive to 12% market share. Think about that. 3,500 presentations. I have never spoken to a sales organization that had market share as their primary objective. Market share is a target that they're going after. Yeah, I hear a lot of we need to raise our revenues, sell more units. I hear a lot of that, but you're targeting something different. Now here's what's happening. This is changing the way you think. This is changing the way you think. Thoughts always precede actions. So the way we think determines how we're going to act. You will hear people say, it happened so fast, I didn't have time to think. Well, yes, you did. You just didn't do any thinking at the conscious level, but you did, in fact, think, and then you reacted. So how will you think differently as a result of this conference? My favorite compliment at the end of a presentation is, you made me think. If I can cause you to think a little bit differently, then perhaps your behavior will change a little bit as well. Well, if we had a video of your very first sales call, raise your hand if you would appreciate us playing it to everybody in the room. I will tell you about my very first sales call. I worked for AT&T. AT&T at that time was the largest corporation in the world, $66 billion in revenue, 1 million employees. Our R&D department was known as Bell Laboratories, where the transistor was invented, a very premier organization. And so we could say with brand recognition and quality and innovation, it would be right up there with Volvo. We could sort of say that, right? Well, not exactly. You see, when I was selling for AT&T, we had the highest price, oldest technology, and slowest delivery. Now, other than that, we were pretty darn competitive, but we had to sell around those three issues. We were also a regulated utility monopoly. In other words, we had the only dial tone in town, and you couldn't run your business without it. Is that correct? Well, let's be honest for a moment. If you can't sell in that environment, you got no business calling yourself a salesperson, right? So what? I was their top salesperson. Well, I went over to sales my 10th year with the company. For the first 10 years, I was in an entry-level position in operations. I soldered wires, got up every morning, put on my blue jeans, packed my lunch in a brown paper sack, went down to 51 Ivy Street, downtown Atlanta, and soldered wires for 8 or 16 hours a day. One day, my boss's boss called me into his office and said, in effect, I see more in you than you see in yourself. I'm going to get you out of here. Have you ever done that? Have you ever looked at someone and said, you know, they're capable of better? They're capable of more. You ever done that? Okay, here's the issue. You see it, they don't. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to stimulate them? Are you going to spark them into doing something better with their lives? Or are you just going to kind of pass it over? Well, I thought I would go to engineering because at AT&T, when you go from operations, you go to engineering. In engineering, I would be working a 35-hour week, not a 40-hour week. Get to wear a necktie to work in an air-conditioned building. This is a great job. I'll be drawing the circuits that I've been wiring for the last 10 years. I can do this in my sleep. He said, engineering's full, I'm going to send you to sales. I said, well, actually, you can give me my tool belt back. I'm going to go upstairs and solder some more wires. I'm not going to sales. If we stop people at random on the streets of the city where you live and said, describe a salesperson to me, who are they going to describe? Used car salesman. How do we know they're lying? Because their lips are moving. Us salespeople don't enjoy an enviable reputation in the marketplace, do we? I mean, even among ourselves. I have done something in my life, I don't know what it is or I would atone for it, but I've done something in my life to attract the seatmate from hell. So if you ever see me on an airplane, look in the adjacent seat and you will see the seatmate from hell. I can spot him in the gatehouse now. Yeah, there he is. 10 o'clock in the morning, he is roaring drunk. Big hat, big belt buckle, that's going to be my seatmate, right? We're going to buckle up, he's going to slap me in the gut and say, what do you do for a living, boy? So I get on the airplane, guess who's sitting next to my seat? And he pops me in the gut, what do you do for a living, boy? I put on my best smile. I say, I represent a full line of insurance products, could we talk? He'll take another flight, he'll take another seat, he'll do anything he can to get away from the consummate salesperson. You know, we can laugh at this, but is your customer seeing you that way? Are you just another salesperson? We're going to break that off today. We're going to talk about that as a myth. So I didn't want to go to sales. Now, he did a sales technique. He didn't know it was a sales technique because he's an operations guy. He did a sales technique. He leaned forward and he said, listen closely, I want you to try this for me. Now, here's the first message I want to plant in your mind. Relationship selling is a redundant term. All selling is relationship selling. Companies don't do business with companies. People do business with people. Your dealership doesn't have any customers. It never has and it never will. Someone in the client organization is buying from someone in your organization. It's always a people-to-people encounter. What is that relationship built upon? If it's price, you're going to lose it to somebody with a lower price. If it's value, if it's understanding, if it's wisdom, then that's a whole different idea. So he leaned forward, he said, I want you to try this for me. I was willing to do something that was terribly uncomfortable for me. Something I did not want to do because that's what he said. You have some customers, you can bring them right up to the brink and they begin to resist. Well, I'm looking at you and brand X, and I'm thinking about you, and I'm thinking about the expense. And if you can say, I want you to try this for me, you'll be amazed how many people will step over. Sales managers, challenge your salespeople. The weakness in management is not raising the bar high enough. Salespeople, who is the individual who was most instrumental in making you the success that you are today? Is that someone who made it so easy for you that you couldn't possibly fail, or is that someone who stretched you beyond your perceived limitations? See, that's the people we need to be. We need to stretch other people. He said, I want you to try this for me. I thought, I'll try it. Now, I don't know squat about sales, but I'll give it a shot. On Friday afternoon, I left the operations department, went over to the sales department, and met this animal called a sales manager. Perhaps you've seen one. They are mean. They complain incessantly, but they dress real nice. He said, Monday morning you're going to be in sales school. I said, well, that would be a good thing because I don't know anything about sales. He handed me a plane ticket. He said, it's in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's a 3-week course. I said, I guess I'll see you in 3 weeks. Monday morning, Cincinnati, Ohio, AT&T Sales School. I'm walking down the hall, turning on the lights. Obviously, these salespeople don't come in as early as us operations people. I found a classroom that had my name on the roster. I turned on the lights, went inside. They had the room set up classroom style, table, chair, center aisle. They had my tent card on the back row. That's where I like to sit. You can work crossword puzzles and check your emails and nobody knows you're doing it, right? But I understood commissioned selling. You don't sell, you don't eat. So I brought my tent card up to the front row, put it there, took that card and put it on the back row. So I'm sitting right on the very front row. And they started teaching me the AT&T sales process methodology. The largest corporation in the world, the company that invented the transistor, 1 million employees, generating $66 billion.